So I am William McKee. I'm an associate consultant with Taylor Clarke. I'm here with Gordon Laird.
Hi, William. Yeah, Gordon Laird, one of the associate consultants at Taylor Clarke also. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Gordon. So Gordon and I made a little video on coaching probably about a month ago. Quite a few people commented, viewed it, and we thought, well, let's have a go at making another one. The one a month ago was about goals and the importance of goals. And I think I certainly found Gordon's perspective really, really interesting on that. And so I guess I asked you again, Gordon, and said, well, what other perspectives might you have that are a wee bit deeper maybe, or a wee bit different to the average, or certainly not in the sort of coaching 101 book. And the thing that you mentioned to me was endings. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'm in. So just tell me about it then. What were you thinking, or what is it about endings that we might chat about?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about endings a lot, William, because I guess with lockdown lasting as long as it did, and has obviously, that during that time, some of the coaching work that I've been involved in came to an end, so the endings were taking place, and I think not only was I having to think about ending in a virtual environment, but I think during this period of COVID, it's so loaded with issues of loss and uncertainty that actually I was wondering about that, whether that was also having an impact on endings. So I guess it was kind of highlighting to me how super important it is to attend to endings, to really pay them, I guess, respect and attention.
I mean, I don't find endings easy, in general or in coaching, and I suspect I'm not alone in that. And so, to really give them the attention they deserve, that's really interesting. So, I mean, what would you say might happen from your experience? What would you say from the coachee's perspective or things like that? What happens if endings aren't really paid attention to, the ending of the coaching relationship? What can go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about endings is that we know they're going to happen. And in coaching, you particularly know that. You know there's going to be an end at some point. And I sometimes wonder, though, whether, although we experience endings in our personal and professional life all the time, there's something actually a bit unusual about this coaching relationship that we have. You set things up hopefully well at the beginning, because beginnings are important also too. You do this work, you maybe go quite deep quite early with people, and you develop this great rapport and relationship, and you know the ending is coming. But do we know how to attend to endings? And I think it's the how that always interests me. I mean, we've known for a long time that, from research that's been done in coaching, that good work that's done in coaching can very easily be put in jeopardy if the ending isn't planned for, attended to, and done properly. And I don't know whether it's something to do with endings, in a way, get in touch with our own experiences of loss, of closing things off. And for some of us, that is easier than it is for others. And I think, therefore, it's important to give it the respect and time to plan for it, to think ahead, to work with your client on what a good ending would look like for them, because there's no one way to do this. So I think, again, you don't want to be too prescribed about it and too process driven about it. It's really important to engage with the client on what would be a good ending for them, and get them to think about it, and to be doing that reasonably early, not on the last session. Signpost it a little bit earlier than that, and give them the opportunity to reflect and think about it.
So that's really interesting. So that would be almost like a sort of process conversation then with the client. So out with the coaching relationship, to say that there's what we're talking about within the bounds of coaching, then there's also talking about how we're working together, and bringing in that conversation about the ending.
Yeah, and it might be as simple as a question about, okay, you know, notice we're at the penultimate session, and we've got the final session coming up. There'll be some things we want to wrap up. You know, for example, a sponsor might be involved for part of the final session. But I might ask a question like, so what would a good ending look like for you? How do you want to spend the time in that last session for us to wrap things up? Something as simple as that, because what I've noticed with some of the people I work with, they're not always thinking about the ritual of finishing and closing, and creating their own ritual for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's a very coaching question, isn't it? You know, what would a good ending look like for you?
Yeah.
It's funny because from my kind of time as a civil engineer, the safety culture side of things, it was always the beginning and the end where there was a prevalence of accidents. And I remember someone saying to me, it's because you're setting something up. And then, you know, the middle is the important bit because that's where stuff gets built.
Yeah.
But the processes are quite well established. They're familiar. You know, people kind of know what's expected and what's not and things. And then the ending, things are being taken down. And that's where there's an element of chaos gets introduced. And you know, there's all sorts can go. I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because it makes me think that the good work that you do in the middle, there's a risk to it in a way, from not, to use your word, attending to the ending.
Yeah, and I think the question that sometimes it throws up for me, I think that's a really interesting analogy that you've given there. That why is it that some people find endings difficult? And of course, you know, what is it about endings that maybe I find difficult? Because there are elements of things I find a bit tricky. I think, you know, to give a couple of examples of this, I mean, one of the things I've noticed sometimes is maybe a reluctance from the person I'm coaching to book that last session in. There's a kind of bit of avoidance maybe, or we have the final session and it's feeling like an ordinary session, like the second or the third session, not the sixth, and me having to work quite hard to get my client to think about, okay, so what are we taking from all this coaching and to end well. And I'm fascinated by why that goes on. And I think the way I look at it very often is that it's something to do with defences, and the defences are there for a good reason. They keep us safe. They keep the threat and risk away. So I think, you know, that person maybe that's avoiding putting the final session in, there's something about their own maybe experiences of loss or difficult endings in their life, and subconsciously it plays out in terms of, oh, you know, I'll look at that and book it into the diary at some point, but it never seems to quite happen, or I'm feeling like I'm chasing to get it in the diary. Or the person who is treating that last session, sometimes actually working really hard to get a lot of issues resolved. That might be about their own drive for perfectionism, or it might be that they're really concerned or a bit anxious about, I need to demonstrate to the organisation, to my boss, that the coaching's been worthwhile. So I'm going to keep attending to the work rather than attend to the ending. And of course, you know, it's about helping that person realise that in coaching there are lots of things you don't get to as well as the things you do get to, and that becomes actually part of the conversation for the ending. And in myself, I know a companion of mine for many years has been that I really don't find goodbyes easy, and I just need to remind myself of that, and as I've raised my own consciousness about that, it's made it more manageable for me, particularly those clients that I've developed a really strong relationship with. To say goodbye is quite hard for me, but it's what I need to do. And I think being aware of it helps, because then you can acknowledge the defences maybe that are coming up and maybe getting in the way of you doing the best you can in the ending. So yeah, there's a lot, I think, going on for people subconsciously when they're involved in an ending of some sort.
I'm really struck by the variance in what you're saying, because there's the coachee and there's going to be such a variance in their reactions to the ending. You know, some people will be absolutely fine and it's just part of the process, and we contracted for X amount of time over X amount of time, and now it's come to an end, and that's all fine. And like you said, there'll be other people who are trying to wring every last drop out of it to demonstrate, what they can do, and there'll be other people that are avoiding it because, if we put it off, then it's never really ended. And then there's us, I guess, as coaches. I mean, I can think about one a little while ago where I think I was, my foible, I guess, is trying to demonstrate value. And I think I was trying to really go for it in the last session. And I think all the coach really wanted was like a nice review. And so and I really thought a lot about it afterwards. I thought, actually, that's on you there, William. That's not been that could have been really, really quite special. And you just had to be more relaxed about letting them have a review and have a conversation that they wanted to have to send it on its way, rather than necessarily feeling like they had to come away from that feeling like they'd got tremendous value, like they had in other coaching sessions. And I mean that might change depending on the client as well. I haven't always had that reaction, so it's like, it's not necessarily a consistent thing from either the coachee or the coach, and that makes it quite interesting to tackle.
Yeah, and of course, I think we're as individuals, we're bringing our whole kind of backstory of endings into those final sessions and the things that are our triggers. And absolutely. I work with many clients actually where we're really clear it's the ending, and actually there's a lot of joy and celebration from retracing the steps, because actually there's something about reminding yourself where you started and where you've ended up, both for not just for the coachee but also for you as the coach. And there's maybe things you've forgotten actually that happened that didn't at the time seem hugely significant. A conversation, something that was tried between sessions, it's turned out to be really important. So the ending's a great opportunity to kind of capture all that good stuff, and it's part of the narrative that person takes away from their experience of working with you. And it's a great opportunity to give feedback to each other. And I guess I think in most cases I would say my experience in coaching would be along those lines. But I think it would be remiss of us not to pay attention to the fact that sometimes endings are difficult for people. And it's important to kind of pay attention to that and have your client front and center. And I think sometimes it's interesting to look at, well, what's it bringing up for you when you notice maybe some reticence or a client kind of avoiding having a conversation about the ending, and what's it bringing up for you? And a good way to kind of process that is just a simple thing like naming out, it's as if, so for example, it's as if you're feeling you need to have produced a polished outcome from this coaching to show your boss, and that can open up a whole new conversation. So I find observations that start it's as if can be really, really valuable, because hopefully there's enough rapport and trust in the relationship that it's okay to say that. And it makes it okay to kind of validate how that person's feeling. It makes it more palatable to be able to talk about and then digest. So there's that thing of just being prepared that not every ending is textbook, and everybody's different, and some people do find endings tricky. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of richness in that, a lot of rich learning in it. Losing my voice.
And it's not, I mean, you get the chapter in the odd book and stuff like that, but it's not it's not something that's hugely focused on. I'm not saying it's not looked at. It is, and it's important, but there's not. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, most coaching books will have something about endings in it, but I've not seen an awful lot of material that talks about maybe some of the underlying dynamics that can be at play
with endings, and certainly more as my training as a psychotherapist, we would pay a lot of attention to endings. Where you maybe would experience things like people not showing up for a final session and things like that, and why that happens. I haven't experienced that in coaching. It's a different context, but yeah, I think you're right. I don't know whether enough has been kind of written about some of the dynamics that can take place in endings and coaching, particularly.
I mean, I really
There's
like
plenty out there about how to do an ending, but I'm talking more about the underlying dynamics.
Yes, yeah, and I think that because there's all this stuff that it can touch on for the coach and the coachee, it's like, a how-to is great and really, really useful, but the depth of stuff that can influence an ending positively and negatively for either person. We could do an hour on this, Gordon. I mean, that's been. I think we've just tipped over 10 minutes. I've really enjoyed chatting to you about it. I think, like I say, I'd love to chat to you more about it. The it's as if thing, I think is I'm going to borrow that one with pride, because it's a nice way into that conversation, isn't it? It just feels as if, and then you can go from there.
Yeah. As I say, it kind of validates maybe some feelings that aren't being spoken by the other person, and you help them. It invites a conversation about what's going on. What's
the best way to end this conversation?
We should attend to our own ending of this conversation. I think that there are so many kind of, I suppose, tips or takeaways for endings, but in terms of our conversation, I think what it's bringing me back in touch with is a couple of things. I suppose, signposting nice and early for people that an ending is coming up, and really engaging with them on how they would like to end. Help them along with that thinking, obviously, because there'll be some great questions maybe that you can both attend to. I think there's something about watching your own responses to endings, and is there anything you're avoiding in the ending? So things like maybe questions you don't necessarily, or you're worried you're not going to get the ideal answer to. So, what value have you got from this coaching, or what's been the real benefit to you, your team, and the organisation from this coaching? You might be a bit worried about what you're going to hear back. Don't be, just engage in that question. And that thing we were talking about, retracing steps, massive value in that. And I think that kind of possibility of self-actualizing, that is a way of facilitating that for your client, and that self-actualizing affirmation is very, very powerful. And remembering that an ending is a new beginning. So I think the kind of questions, the conversation topics we might bring to an ending, really encouraging your client to think about the new beginnings, not just what has gone on in the coaching. That I think is important too.
Like linking it forward to what comes next, and how things will be different or better. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, Gordon.
You're very welcome. Pleasure as always, William.
Take care.
Cheers.